I wonder if we have the right vocabulary to talk about the things we talk about in the hedge fund industry. It's an interesting thought. I just came across reading Philip Goff's comments on the way he perceives science is going wrong. And I just want to share my thoughts on this and how this relates to the hedge fund industry. This is the Not Even Wrong podcast. It's June 27th, 2020. This is Krim Delko. Today is a Saturday, no updates. So I want to take this time and talk about, in general, what I think about this concept of vocabulary. And I think it can get us to the wrong positions and the wrong way of to think about this business. And therefore, I think it's pretty relevant to the hedge fund industry. So Philip Goff, in his book Galileo's Error, says that Galileo, when he sort of invented a new way of science, decided that the language of mathematics should be the language in which science is being conveyed and talked about. And while this was very successful for the next couple hundred years and developed into physics and technologies that we use today, Goff says that Galileo, by using the vocabulary of math, basically neglected a lot of realities that we still aren't able to explain. Things like consciousness, things like the intrinsic value of things. For example, the color red is definable in physics by the laws of mathematics and the laws of physics. However, we cannot really grasp the concept of color red. And what he further talks about is the experiment of a blind neuroscientist, Mary. She absolutely understands mathematically, logically, what the color red means, but she still doesn't know what it is because she doesn't actually experience it. And this is the starting point of today's episode, because I feel that we in the hedge fund industry are actually in the same position. We have a vocabulary that we use, and I think this vocabulary explains a lot of things, but it's not able to grasp the thing per se. What is the vocabulary we use in the hedge fund industry? We definitely use finance, business, economics, physics, psychology. So we take a lot of things out of these sciences and try to make sense out of a very complex and messy world. But I think, to be fair, we don't have a hedge fund vocabulary. We don't have a vocabulary that helps us get to the point, reduce things to that minimum where we're clear about what we're talking about and we don't use any more information. So I think we're a bit like watching the weather from way up there and seeing storms, rains, sunshine, seeing all these things from 100,000 feet above, trying to make sense out of all this complexity. But we don't have a vocabulary that really helps us grasp the fundamental things that we really care about in this business. And therefore, we're very similar to Philip Goff's Galileo error type situation in science. Now, science, to be fair, first of all, has had a lot more time to figure these things out and sort out a lot of details. So they're also more successful in that sense. They're able to come up with stuff and make predictions. I think we in the investment world are definitely not there yet. If you look at the history of investing, and I don't want to go way too far back, to me, the investors in the modern world start with the Medici family and these types of people, like the Venetian merchants. These guys were, I would say, the first modern risk takers, in a sense that they had to take risks. They weren't able to just clip coupons, own land, and collect, rents from owning land. They had to take risks. They had to finance trade and ships and take risk in buying certain spices and hope that they sell and things like that. So these guys, I think they weren't using very sophisticated methods. I don't think they were in the Galileo realm of like, hey, can we use something more sophisticated, maybe a formal language like math, to analyze what's going on? Galileo famously threw a stone down a tower. I think it was the Tower of Pisa, and then thought about why is the stone falling down to earth. And I'm not sure that the Medici family thought about their investments that way. So therefore, I think the need to develop a formal language for investing, or even think about the language of investing in the sense that, hey, can we find a way to talk about this so we can maybe make better predictions or avoid errors? That need, I think, didn't come up in those days. And honestly, I don't think it came up all the way to the modern times. I think recently it came up. I think there's a lot of people in business schools and other faculties thinking about this. There's people in businesses thinking about this because there's a lot of money, a lot of capital being invested. And because particularly today we have zero interest rates almost everywhere in the world, I think the need to understand real returns, organic, real growth, abilities to generate wealth, abilities to have impact, all those things which I think are the purpose of the hedge fund industry, they become more prevalent. So we have to start developing a vocabulary to be able to grasp that. And I think very similar to science, we're stuck in a world where we used, let's say, we used finance, the vocabulary of finance, in a way that was very helpful to get a sense for the what is. For example, what is this business? What are the assets? What are the cash flows? What are the balance sheet situations? Which is fine, but that's not going to get you to wealth generation. So I think we have to dig deeper and think about a new sort of vocabulary. I think Clayton Christensen laid the groundwork for what I believe is the path to go. And the path to go is a theory of competitive response. Because I think wealth generation fundamentally is not about the what, it's about the where it's going. And although it's important to think about the what, the same way it's important to think about the Missouri River or the Mississippi River in terms of where do they start, it is much, much more important to think about how do they get to the point of being the Missouri River or the Mississippi River. How does the Mississippi Delta end up being what it is? A gigantic amount of water, a dominant entity in their space. The creek that starts the Mississippi River is irrelevant. And I don't think we should spend a lot of time thinking about the creek and how it came together and all that. But to find a vocabulary or a way to think about how actually that little thing turned into this gigantic river, I think that is where the investment world stands when it comes to businesses, disruption, and wealth creation. I think, as I said, Clayton Christensen is a good starting point. I'm not sure I have all the answers today. This is me thinking about these issues without offering a ready-to-use set of rules and formulas. Please, by no means, this is not what I'm trying to do. What I'm trying to bring up here is, first of all, ask the question, define the problem, and offer a path. And I think the path is the theory of competitive response. I think when it comes to the vocabulary of wealth creation and impact on society, the question of how does X evolve is a lot more important than what X is actually. And Although I think there is some importance to that entity. For example, it was important that Amazon was started by Jeff Bezos in the way it was started. I don't think we can neglect all of that. I don't think we can replace Jeff Bezos with a random person. But the way Amazon evolved and certain crucial points in the development of Amazon, and the same applies to Tesla or Microsoft or even less giant companies like Lululemon or Boston Beer, all these disruptors that were able to create something new and generate a lot of wealth. Even something like MSCI. Nobody talks about MSCI. MSCI was spun off from Morgan Stanley in 2009. The market cap was below $2 billion. Today, the market cap is $30 billion, and the company is on the path to actually become more valuable than Morgan Stanley. And not anytime soon, but I would say in the next 5 to 10 years that will happen. And we're not talking about, people coming up with new laws of physics or geniuses a la Einstein here. We're just talking about a certain situation which led to something unbelievably valuable. And it's worth thinking about what was the process that got them from where they were to where they are today. And that process is something I want to keep thinking about, and I want to keep talking about. I just want to lay this out today as a problem, as a question that I'm asking myself. I think it's a question of vocabulary, it's a question of theory. That's why I think Clayton Christensen's theory of competitive response is a key starting point, but it's not complete by any means. Otherwise, we would have the solution today. So I think it's a question of where do we start and how do we evolve, and what are the patterns or I don't want to use the word laws, but what are the methods that are being applied? Are there any maybe correlations or things that we can see across these sectors that end up being instrumental in creating wealth and impact? Thank you.